This presentation will cover the Statute of Frauds, a legal doctrine under contracts. We'll go over the Statute of Frauds, its definition and brief history, the contract types that are said to fall under the Statute of Frauds, as well as exceptions under the common law and under the Uniform Commercial Code, which applies to contracts for goods. Quick review of contract elements. As we know, a contract is an agreement between parties creating mutual obligations that are enforceable by law. And here are their elements: a valid offer and acceptance, adequate consideration, capacity, and legality expressed by mutual assent. As we know, verbal agreements meeting all these elements are still legally enforceable. However, under some contract types, a verbal agreement and a handshake are not sufficient to constitute a legally enforceable contract. Some contracts are enforceable only if set forth in writing and signed by the party against whom enforcement is sought. That's the party to be charged or the defendant. These contracts are said to fall under the Statute of Frauds. The historical purpose for this statute was the British Parliament hundreds of years ago identified 6 types of contracts that created too many plaintiffs bringing too many fraudulent actions, claiming to have formed contracts with their defendants when in fact they had not. In the US, all states have enacted statutes derived from the Old British Statute of Frauds, and lawyers and courts refer to all such statutes collectively as the Statute of Frauds. To remember the contract types which fall under the Statute of Frauds, a good mnemonic to remember is my legs. So, my legs. These are the types of contracts that are said to fall under the Statute of Frauds and are enforceable only if set forth in writing signed by the defendant. That's marriage or contracts formed in consideration of marriage, such as "I'll buy you a new car if you marry me," or more realistically, prenuptial agreements. Year, contracts for which the parties cannot complete performance within 1 year. It's literally impossible to perform within 1 year. A note on this: don't get tripped up on lifetime or indefinite contracts. These do not fall under the Statute of Frauds because it is impossible for a party to make a lifetime promise, because in reality that party may die within 1 year. Land, contracts for the sale or transfer of an interest in land, which includes real property on the land. Executor, contracts by the executor or administrator of a will to pay a debt of the estate with their own money. Goods, contracts for the sale of goods totaling $500 or more, and again these fall under the UCC. And finally, surety, contracts in which one party becomes a surety or acts as a guarantor for another party's debt or other obligation. There are some exceptions which remove the contract from the Statute of Frauds. Full performance is one of these. So as soon as any one party fully performs under the contract, then the Statute of Frauds does not apply, and therefore the contract is enforceable without a signed writing. A way to remember this exception is purchasing something in a store over $500 does not require a written signed contract. Why not? In this scenario, each party has fully performed. You hand over $500, the cashier at the Bath & Body store hands you a bag of wonderfully scented lotions and candles during the semi-annual sale. The deal is done and is therefore removed from the Statute of Frauds. There is also an exception under the common law, and this is part performance. A lot of words here, but basically it's like promissory estoppel and only applies in situations where a transfer of interest in land exists and with specific performance. So an example of this is, in the absence of a writing signed by the seller, a buyer occupies the premises with the seller's permission and makes improvements. Most courts will allow the buyer to enforce the contract. So say the seller sells their farm and allows the buyer to build a barn. The buyer's partial performance makes the contract enforceable despite the lack of signed writing. To wrap it up, a contract for the sale of land falls under the Statute of Frauds, but partial performance removes it from the Statute of Frauds. Thus, the contract is enforceable without a signed writing and with specific performance, which in this case is the transfer of title to the land and improvements. There are also some exceptions which apply to goods under the UCC 2-201. Again, part performance, only with respect to goods for which payment has been made and accepted, or goods which have been received and accepted. What does that mean? A seller accepts a $600 payment from the buyer, thus the seller must provide the buyer with $600 worth of beach balls. Conversely, the buyer has accepted a delivery of 100 beach balls at $6 each. Thus, the buyer must pay the seller $600. Another exception is the special manufacturer exception. This applies to goods that are to be specially manufactured for the buyer and are not suitable for sale to any others, provided that the seller has made a substantial beginning of their manufacture or commitments for their procurement prior to the buyer's repudiation. So an example of this would be if I order custom buttons that say, "My name for president," and the seller has begun to manufacture the buttons or made a procurement commitment specific to my order, such as ordering specially printed paper with my name on it in order to manufacture the buttons. Let's do a question. First, we'll read the call of the question. Is the father's oral promise to pay off the son's student loans enforceable? So when we're thinking about oral promises and enforceability, we have to ask ourselves about the statute of frauds. It must be in writing and signed by the party against whom enforcement is sought in order to be enforceable if it falls within one of those contract types, my legs. As for the facts, a father promised his son that if the son married the daughter of a politician within 18 months, the father would assume responsibility for the son's student loans. The father and son never signed a written contract. 14 months later, the son married the politician's daughter. The father refused to make any payments for the son's loans. Is the father's oral promise to pay off the son's student loans enforceable? So we'll read A first. Yes, because the main purpose doctrine provides an exception to the statute of frauds for surety contracts. A is no good because the facts of the hypo are not related to the main purpose doctrine nor a surety contract. And further, the main purpose doctrine does not provide an exception to the statute of frauds, so we can rule that out. B, yes, because the contract could have been, although it was not, fully performed within 1 year. So this statement is actually true, but the possibility of full performance within a year actually makes a contract outside the statute of frauds. So you might get tripped up on this, but we can't forget too that the consideration in this fact pattern is marriage. So this fact pattern actually indicates that it does in fact fall under the statute of frauds. So the no answers are right. So no, because the contract allowed for performance extending beyond 1 year. So this might be a bit of a red herring, and although the fact pattern indicates that it allows for performance beyond a year, it is not impossible for the son to marry the daughter within 18 months. He could marry her tomorrow, and the statute of frauds applies to contracts which are impossible to perform within 1 year. So that leaves D, no, because a contract made in consideration of marriage must be in writing. So this seems right. That's true that a contract in consideration of marriage must be in writing and signed by the party against whom enforcement is sought in order to be enforceable per the statute of frauds. So that's your right answer. If you'd like to see the statute of frauds applied in a case, check out Browning v. Poirier. I won't give away too many spoilers, but the case entails a romantic relationship and a winning lottery ticket. And finally, if you have any questions, the LEAP team offers office hours throughout the term on contracts and other subjects. You can also sign up for LEAP on Canvas and get all the latest news. We hope you found this video helpful, and thanks for watching.